Kai, welcome to the launch of issue 31 to Hear. This is part of the Sensorium series, 4 issues that look at the non-visual senses that are important in how we experience and how we create objects. And even though we're here in the cloud, in Zoomland, obviously we're connected by various wires and so on that give it a terrestrial presence. And the wires that host this particular platform are based in Melbourne, which is a city that was established by the British less than 200 years ago. But originally it was called Naarm, and this is the land of the Wurundjeri people, who are part of a complex of Aboriginal nations that have been existing here for nearly 60,000 years, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and to the ancestors of the lands where you come from as well. So welcome very much. And I wonder, Karen, you're with us in Aotearoa. Lovely to see you, Kai. And you have your instrument with you, do you? Kai o'o? Is that how you say it?
I have a pūtorino with me.
Right. And I wondered if you would like to, perhaps to help us tune in, if you could give us a sound from that instrument.
Ka pai. Mauri ora tātou. He uri tēnei no te raroa ngā puhi me tautu atitaki. E noho ana au ki te whanganui ātara, poneke, Aotearoa, ko Karen Leaf tōku ingoa. Kia ora whānau. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Karen. I hail from the Maiti Hukianga here in Aotearoa and Aitutaki in the Cook Islands. I wrote an article about my relationship with Taonga Pūoro, and this is one of my friends. They are a pūtorino. And this Pūoro is specific to Aotearoa and to the Indigenous people, our tangata whenua he our Māori whānau. So yeah, kia ora. Let me set up this microphone.
Canceling thing is
Tuia I runga, tuia I raro, tuia I roto, tuia I waho. Tuia te kupu, tuia te korero, tuia te mātauranga a kuima, a koroma, tuia kia tina. Haumie, huie, kai.
Hai kie.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
there's a sound canceling thing that a lot of times will cancel. There should be a thing that says original sound for musicians. You should be able to turn on, so that should be for anyone who's making sound. Otherwise, it's good. The Zoom will edit
I
it
see.
out.
That's
It
in the
cancels
sound,
it, yeah.
sound settings, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, I found that when playing any Taonga Pūoro, even just trying to record it on your phone, it just, the frequency of the type of oro just can't be picked up very well, and I'm not fancy enough to know how to try to do it digitally to pick it up, but
Yeah.
All
Can-
right.
can you
Well,
find-
I've just
I
can
have
you find
whoever heard it.
I've just enabled the, as you said, thanks very much, Craig, for that. So I wonder, Karen, if you could perhaps just give us that sound again. So
Yeah, it should be in the upper, she should have a link in the upper left-hand corner. This says original sound for musicians, maybe?
right.
Do you have that, Karen?
I can't. I just see a little green tick.
Yeah, click on that.
If I go into audio.
No?
Oh, here we go. Original sounds for musician.
Yes. Be on. That's all.
Okay, wait, let me see.
Sorry, I just said that.
Can you hear that?
I can't know.
Yeah, just, yep.
Oh, you can't.
I can't even see where my speaker's from. Can you
It
hear that? I'm
sounds
just
so far away.
A little, yes. It looks good. But we heard a reverberation there. Thank you so much, Karen. So now we have the presencing exercise, and this is inspired by Gary Warner. And it's a minute where we can just simply understand the senses that are in play around us. So I invite you to put your speakers on mute so that you can simply listen to the
It is on mute, isn't it?
No, it's not. He muted himself. You need to click on
What do I do? Just
close that window. Close it. Yeah,
just come and do it. I don't understand what you're saying.
close it. And then click on mute. Just on the microphone. Once. Click.
Okay, thank you. Tony, you're probably very surprised by what you strayed into at that moment, but welcome.
Thank you. Apologies for
That's
I
fine.
was in traffic. Here I am. Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite Gary Warner, the guest editor, to offer a reflection on the experience of helping to put this particular issue together.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm on Gadigal country in Sydney on the east coast of the Australian continent. And I'll just be very brief because I would want us all to be able to hear from each other. I've been working with Kevin for quite a few years now since the South Project, which was, when was that, Kevin? 15 years ago, 20 years ago?
Nearly 20 years.
Nearly 20 years ago, the South Project. And love working with Kevin and with Garland. And this opportunity to, I guess I saw it as an opportunity to bring together different people who may know about each other, but may not have otherwise been connected. And also just to provide an opportunity to focus on thinking about sound and making, which is where we sort of started out. And I'm really happy with the way that the whole issue has come together. Kevin sort of brought people. I've invited people who've all agreed and I think enjoyed the opportunity to think about and write about their activities. And one of the things I found in reading all of the articles is all of these interesting cross connections that are made between the articles, either as sort of references to inspiration or connections of ideas that people are all often working with exploring, struggling with perhaps. So that was really interesting, this idea of sort of networks of people who are perhaps not connected directly, but are connected through practice and ideas. So yeah, and it's been a terrific process for me. It's really been so enjoyable, and really appreciate everyone who put the time into writing and contributing to the issue. So thank you all.
Thanks very much, Gary, and thanks for not only gathering such interesting practices together, but also your own practice in its many different resonances. So let's start the proceedings now with going through the articles. Karen, you're still with us to talk about your article?
I am.
Oh, good. I'll just put it up on screen. There you go. Okay.
Is there anything that you want to hear, like want me to speak to, or do you just want me to speak to all of it?
Yes, the general about the experience of writing the article and you know what you discovered in that process.
Yeah. So I wrote about Tangapuro being our Māori instruments. One definition of it. And I think it was really powerful for me to put my journey and relationship to puoro to paper, from puoro to paper, and kind of preserving my present moment with that journey. It was super healing. It just unearthed heaps of experiences that I've forgotten about what it's like to engage with taonga puoro. I got super creative in this space, so I did a lot of, well, all of the imagery myself. I've never drawn before, but that was an experience.
Cool.
Everything just flowed, just like the sounds of our puoro, I feel, onto the page. And yeah, it was really important for me to, in this process, to acknowledge my tuakana, my mentors in this space, the kaitiki of taonga puoro, past, present, and future. And so I really wanted to highlight and celebrate them just as much as the puoro, as the instruments themselves. Yeah.
So thank you so much, Karen, and it certainly exposes the depth of, as you say, taonga puoro in Aotearoa, and with Isaac Te Awa's article on the poi poi, you know, gives a sense of the richness and variety of musical instruments. But as we've seen with the limits of Zoom, in terms of being able to hear them, are there opportunities in Aotearoa to hear these instruments? Are there concerts, or is it more something which is customary within marae or other spaces?
Yeah, there are many applications of taonga puoro. Taonga puoro, I think, will always be a powerful tool for tangata whenua to be able to activate space and ritual within Māori culture. But there are ample opportunities for us to all use and engage with taonga puoro. There are often gigs out there that happen, or that celebrate taonga puoro. Te Kahurero Moa Taumata, one of my tuakana, she has an album out that includes a lot of taonga puoro in her music. It's called Acts of Service. And my tuakana Ruby Solly also has a book out that kind of touches on her relationship with taonga puoro too. So there's, yeah, I think we're definitely in this beautiful space of the revitalization of taonga pōro where it is quite accessible to engage with pōro.
Right, wonderful. Well, maybe we can share some of those recordings as well during this issue. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank
Kia ora.
you. Thank you.
And
Yeah.
now we go to India and welcome Shivani Gandhi, who is part of the MAP Academy, which is a partner of Garland, whose article touched on the power of song in Indian craft. Shivani, are you there?
Yes, thanks, Kevin. Hi, everybody. I'm Shivani. And the article has been written by our research team by Chandrika, Simran, and Niyati Dave. I'm here as a representation from the MAP Academy. So I think the process of us writing this article actually came about when our team was researching for our online textiles course, which is textiles from Indian subcontinent. And while we were doing this research, we realized that there are so many other histories associated with textiles. And one in particular was the history of singing songs while weaving. And there are networks in India, such as the Trijan Project, People's Archive of Rural India. They have documented a lot of these songs that weaver community or communities sing, but we just thought that it would be interesting to explore how these songs are still used as a tool of memory, even in popular culture, like even songs, Bollywood songs often have these lyrics, and we often don't realize where they come from or what is the history of these lyrics. So that was really the process of how we came about to this topic. I have written a small paragraph just summarizing what the article sort of covers, and I would like to just say that. So textile-based techniques and practices are typically associated with the sense of sight and touch. But if we think about it, they can just be as easily linked with hearing and sound. In India, there's a deep connection between songs and weaving, one which goes beyond lyric and metaphor to find a unique place in spiritual and communal practices. The article covers a few examples. For instance, in the mountainous region of Ladakh, the loom and life are intricately bound with the act of weaving, assuming a spiritual significance in songs and guiding the weaver towards liberation. In Punjab, on the other hand, rural women traditionally gather together to weave and sing songs, in the process transmitting generational knowledge of such work, exchanging stories, teasing each other, and creating a space for self-expression. In other parts of India, like Kashmir, where textile practitioners work with multi-step process to create fabric, songs are often used as mnemonic devices and oral instructions. There are many other communities spread across India that have this tradition. In fact, just yesterday, I saw this film called Bitter Chestnut by Gurvinder Singh, and it's a ethnographic film on the community in Bir, on the Bir community living in Himachal Pradesh. And in the movie, in the film, I saw the community weaving, and they had they were singing a really interesting song which I didn't understand, and yeah, so this article throws light on some of these traditions, and I hope that there are more that we can throw light on in the coming issues. Thank you.
And we'll hear more from Sarah Lindsay later about weaving and sound. And thank you for providing a beautiful quote for the Love Nest, one of the new features in the Garden of Stories about the stories of love, which feature so much in Indian culture. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And if we go back to Gary now, and your article on the shakuhachi, which is beautiful in its detail.
myself. Yes. Okay. I'll be very quick because I did write, I think, 4 or 5 articles, so I won't talk about all of them, I don't think, in any great detail. People can read them. But this was really just an idea about I wanted to write some contextual little essays for the issue. And this was really the sort of beginnings of Kevin's and my conversations about this idea of the sounds of making. And I just wanted to sort of tie it back to a single instrument and something that can be relatively easily made, but also something that's got a very long tradition of making and is in fact quite complex to create one of these instruments. And I've travelled quite a bit in Japan, and I've always been interested in the shakuhachi through people like Riley Lee and others. But I just wanted to sort of explore this idea about, well, we know the sounds of instruments, but what about the sounds of the making of the instruments, and those kinds of sounds that are generally not terribly well considered, I guess, or are considered as ancillary or sounds that are not really to be paid much attention to. So I just wanted to sort of bring our sort of thinking around to stretching the idea of the sound of the instrument from the sounds that it makes to the sounds of its making. So that's what this one was intended to do within the broader context of the whole issue.
Wonderful. Thanks. Thanks very much, Gary. And
Yeah, it was a great article. Terrific.
Yeah, it was. Sarah.
Thanks, Phil.
It was a great bonus to get your story about the sounds of weaving. How did you find writing that?
Sorry, I'm just trying to find myself. Can you see me on the screen?
No, not yet.
I'm not sure why.
Maybe your video stopped. Just bottom left.
No, it was just as it was before. Sorry, so I'm just on my iPad.
Okay.
I came up here.
You can start talking. I've got you now.
Oh, you have. Okay. Okay. So hello everyone from Nam, or Melbourne, Australia. I've been a weaver, I hate to say, for a professional weaver for almost 50 years. And during that time, I've studied in a big weaving school in Japan, so encountered all sorts of different equipment there. I've worked in a big workshop in Melbourne with completely different kinds of equipment. And then I've had a studio of my own for probably the last 30, 40 years, where I've worked on a smaller scale, but nevertheless, I've had lots of equipment that makes sound. And I've always been really intrigued by the sound, both of the actual weaving process and of preparing materials, preparing the loom. So I loved writing this article, and in fact it probably had been kind of hovering in my brain for many, many years. So I was really delighted to be asked to just put something together about sounds. So the sort of middle section is quite, in many ways, quite didactic, with lots of videos referring to specific sounds. And then the article itself, it's quite a short article, is sort of bookended by 2 experiences I had of going to concerts, one in 1985, I think it was, by the sound artist Akio Suzuki, and then a more recent one by contemporary musicians in Melbourne called Elysian, and the piece was based on a composition by Elisa Lim. And really just coming home from that last concert, I just sat down and wrote the article really quickly the next day with an enormous joy. So I hope everyone enjoys it. And I guess for so many of us who worked in sort of craft-based or more making processes, we're all surrounded by certain kinds of sounds from our equipment and tools. And it's just how much you take notice of it, really, I think. And I feel like that's something that I've taken notice of for many years. So it was good to put it down on paper, as it were.
Good.
Yeah.
Just
Shows
quickly,
a keen sense of listening, Sarah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Beautiful article.
just quickly, one of those connections I was talking about before, Akio Suzuki, when Sarah told me that he was an inspiration, he's been a great inspiration for me over the years. And Phil, you've played with Akio, I think.
Yeah, often. Yeah, he's a very close friend. Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's
it's lovely to hear him mentioned.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I've never forgotten that performance. It's kind of, in my DNA now, I think. Yep.
Right. Good. Okay. Now, Tony Warburton.
Hello, I can't see where I am now, but that's all right.
Me neither.
I was delighted to be invited by Kevin, whose analog sound experiments by Gary, and then to be followed up by Kevin. I love Gary's analog sound experiments with drawing and so forth, and I really appreciated being able to think about words, which I love, and the notion of onomatopoeia was the thing that stayed with me after writing this article about a very ordinary process that I use with not many tools and pretty much on my own in the studio. But I find the sounds that I hear and listen to when I'm working are very much clues to the way that I'm responding to the medium and the way that the medium is taking form and the way that the clay is drying. All these things, somehow I feel that the medium itself teaches me a lot on so many levels. I'd like to also just acknowledge Neil Hoffman for, at very short notice, adding a note for us about wood firing, because I am not an experienced wood firer, but I referred to it in the article, and Gary was keen to have some more insight into that. And Neil Hoffman makes marvelously experimental pieces, which you can see on his Instagram feed. He fires actual lumps of rock from his paddock by burying them in sand and letting them transform through the intense heat of the wood fire. But my start for the article, I don't know if, can you see this? It's my sketchbook. It's just a whole lot of words. And at first, here we are, and it'll be a bit blurred, but that's how I started. And at first I was just going to do a painting of onomatopoeic words, and then I realized it needed to be a kind of essay. So that was a different direction that I took. But what I've been left with is this incredible curiosity about the whole notion of onomatopoeia, because all of these words are words that the English language, which is the only language that I'm fluent in, makes up to mimic kind of sounds that don't actually, ping and ting and all of these words. Well, I guess everyone hears those kinds of sounds, whatever language they speak. And so then I became really intrigued. Well, how do you spell ping in Arabic, and how does bl get spelt in another language altogether? And so I'm left with this kind of hovering intrigue and curiosity that the writing the article kind of took me into, largely because I think of the beautiful context that Garland offers of this global kind of way that people talk about craft and making and the living traditions of that. So that's probably enough said. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tony. And it does seem to evoke the idea of a poetry of making if you think about it as onomatopoeia, and I'm sure we'll find some interesting poems somewhere about that. Now,
I
Gary,
hope so.
I think we could skip showing your article because you've got something to show us, haven't you, about the drum that was the extraordinary subject of your article and photography. And you're on mute. You're on mute.
The host would like you to unmute. Okay.
That's being...
Actually, if you look down through the article and go through some of the slides, I actually bought this yesterday, which is very close to the place where I was this morning, at Bodhanath Stupa here in Kathmandu. And the beauty of this is that I bought it from the workshop where I had been writing the article. And it was this meeting that inspired me to buy one, because I've been writing about so many crafts, but never really sitting down and thinking, oh, I would like to have one of those. It's usually been through the photographs that I feel I kind of have intimacy with those objects. So this is the first kind of object that I've really bought related to the craft articles that I'm writing. It's very, very beautifully made. The wood is actually from Bhutan. This particular wood they can't get in Nepal. The bigger ones, which I also had a look at yesterday, they're a little bit outside my budget. They were about $500, and they're this sort of size. This was about $40. It's got a gold-plated copper ring around it. And these beaters, they are supposed to traditionally contain the ashes of bones. Anyway, they're bone ashes of people, and the skins are goat skins. And then there's this long tassel at the end, and I'm not very proficient at this, but it's a wonderful, somehow there are so many beautiful elements in this object, and I love them, and such a weird shape. And it comes also with its own carrying case. So,
Oh,
Wow.
very special. I feel really, really happy to have this.
Good, thank you so much, Gary. And maybe we'll share that video that you took.
Shall I show it now? I can show it. Wait 1 second. I'll just I'll show it through my phone so you can see that way, I think.
So this is your experience at 5:30 this morning, and I can see that we're up against Zoom's cancelling of music, of musicians. So we'll have to work a way around that. So thanks very
we're
much.
getting censored.
Gary.
I didn't hear you. You said we have to work a way around what?
Zoom is cancelling, it seems, any music that we might be playing apart from the voice. It's
didn't hear anything.
It's a very anthropocentric medium. Obviously, it only privileges the human voice. But
I will. I tell you what I will do. I'll upload it to YouTube, and I'll send you the link, and you can
Great.
always.
Thank you so much for that.
Okay.
Good. Now we go to Vicky Brown, whose exhibition "Sound is as much in the dirt as it is in the air" is part of this issue. Vicky, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good. There we go.
Yeah, thanks to Gary for inviting me, and to Kevin It's been really fun. I guess I was looking for a long time, been using sound as a material in my practice, which is sort of installation based. So I was just thinking about how I guess sound is situated in materials, and how we know the world and materials through sound, even if they're not audible, because it forms our understanding of that material or of that object, even if we're kind of aware of it or not. And I think that kind of connects back to some of the, sound present in weaving, or sound present in the making of something. So I use lots of everyday objects and materials, and often maybe forgotten technologies, to make these kind of sound installations that you can walk through and experience. Mainly just to think about connections between materials, with sort of sound being the framework of them. So I guess they sort of explore the history of those objects or the social positioning of them through the way I just use materials. Yeah.
Great.
So,
Thank you so much, Vicky. It's certainly an extremely unique practice, where it combines visual and sound so beautifully. So, thank you a lot. Now go to Phil Dadson, which is one of the articles that related to the harp, which turned out to be a common element in a number of stories.
Yeah, thank you. Kia ora koutou. Greetings, everybody. I'm Phil. Thanks, Gary and Kevin, for inviting me to be part of this. It's nice to be involved in a making magazine. It was a nice pleasure to actually analyze the construction of the harp when I was in the midst of a project that had 8 harps situated in different parts of the South Pacific and around the coast of the North Island, at Aotearoa. And I was sort of totally immersed in that when this invitation came, and Gary very kindly assisted with an initial draft, with notes I supplied, and then we refined it together. So it was a really nice process to be able to go through just talking about the actual construction of how you make an Aeolian wind harp that's played solely by the wind. And this project was used very metaphorically it was a climate-based project, part of World Weather Network, which was 28 regions around the world, actually art-related gallery sort of projects that each one set up a weather station. So the local one here is the Tatui Gallery Weather Station, called Huareri, Weather Eye, Weather Ear, and Weather Choir is one of the projects. So this was the idea of the harp. When it operates, when it's still and it's silent, and when it's calm, it's sonorous and harmonious, and when it's wild and windy and gusty, it's dissonant and screams. So it was a very good kind of, if you like, voicing of the weather. That was pretty much what the article was about too, and in terms of how you actually construct it and put it together and get the thing functioning. So this actual particular harp idea is a very basic one, and it was inspired a little by an artist friend of mine, John Cousins, who's also worked with Aeolians, and he came up with the simple tripodic structure idea, and I just modified things a bit, and then we sent off a DIY kit to the 8 different locations around Te Moana Nui Kiwa, which is the Polynesian Pacific. And each location came up with their own solution for the tripod and the heavy weight and so forth to hold the column of strings. But there's some samples in the article that people can listen to.
Great.
Yeah, pretty much it.
Thank you so much, Phil. That certainly helped identify the idea of giving voice to the world as one of the key learnings of this issue. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thanks for the chance.
And
I'd just like to say kia ora to Karen too and Isaac if they're there. Nice to, I've got friends from Aotearoa in this. It's great.
yes, good. And Gary, would you like to say something about your article on the Centre for Deep Reading?
Just very quickly, I mean, as I say, I wrote a few articles, and they're really just the idea was to, I guess, provide some points of focus through people's reading gradually over the 3 months and on into the future, just to give some ideas about I guess the way that I think about hearing and listening. Pauline Oliveras, who you saw there, is another great sort of inspiration for me and for many people around her ideas of deep listening. And so I guess part of it was just really sort of to bring people who may not be aware of some of these thinkers around sound, that they might get the spark of interest and go out and on their own path find out about these people. And this is the image that you saw. There was a project that was really inspired by Pauline Oliveras, creating a kind of deep listening experience within another sort of very focused experience around reading that was put together by a friend of mine, Nick Keys, and he wanted to have some other sort of sensory experiences as part of this reading retreat. And so I came up with this project of just miking up the outside world and allowing people to sit and listen to that sort of amplified sound of the immediate surrounds. And it's quite, for many people, this is a really sort of affective and curious experience that they haven't otherwise had. I mean, as field recorders, for anyone who field records, it's an experience that we're very familiar with. And it's a really interesting and often quite sort of pleasurable experience to be able to sit in the sound of the moment for protracted periods of time. So this is this idea about the difference between an idea of silence, of say dead silence, and living quietude. So I just wanted to explore that idea a little bit.
Thanks very much, and it's a good segue to the listening biennial. Diane Arayola.
Hello, hi everyone. So we are hosting the Listening Biennial second edition here in Manila because I'm based in Manila. So I'm I'm a curator for contemporary art, but I work closely with musicians and sound artists. No, the Listening Biennial for Asia, for the second edition that I'm curating, we're calling it Inter-Asia Plus, because it is like the first opportunity for us to gather again after the pandemic. The practice of sound and noise in Asia is quite very tight. Like before the pandemic, we almost twice a year we will gather like somewhere, like in Indonesia, in Manila, in Kyoto, wherever else. So this is the first opportunity after that. That's why we're calling it the Inter-Asia Plus. So there are events that are happening mostly in Manila. So we're having exhibitions, listening sessions that will be open online and on site. We have Gary and Kevin joining us to present. Others like John Kannenberg is joining from Portsmouth. Others from Asia, Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, and Tokyo are joining us also to present playlists that they have and they would want to share with the rest of the community. There's also a symposium that is happening focused on attentional ecology in August 2nd and August 2nd here in Manila. July 20th, I forget the date, in Bangkok, and another one in Kuala Lumpur. So generally, this is Listening Biennial Inter-Asia is a reunion of it is a reunion and opportunity to meet new people who are probably keen on thinking, talking about, and doing listening. So yeah, that's the gist of it.
So yes, thank you so much, Diane. It's beautiful timing, and it's great to have a kind of a Filipino attitude coming through, this idea of, is it Tembayan, of conversation?
Tambayan, yes.
Yeah, so
So
we've got a
tambayan,
lot to learn
yeah,
from
this
that.
is like a tambayan. This is hanging out.
Yes, well, we'll hear from Saiful Islam at the end, but he also told us about, I think it's Ada, which is the Bengali version of conversation. So yes, we can
Wonderful.
all learn from that. Now, Gary, we're back to you with the article on noise.
Okay. I think I'll just let people read this one,
Okay.
so that you're not just listening to me a lot. I'll talk about the last article that I wrote, but this is sort of part 3 about this idea of notes on hearing and listening.
All right.
Noise is very close to my heart, so you can read the article.
Good. David, your article on sound before sound.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, everybody. David Chesworth on Wurundjeri country here in Melbourne.
Hello.
What's happening? Is there a problem?
No problem.
Oh, good. People were going, hello, hello. Oh, maybe they were nice hellos. They sounded like questioning hellos. So this work that I made with Sonia Lieber, who is also contributing to this Garland issue. This work's called Sound Before Sound, 1 and 3 scores. And Gary asked me to write some words about this work. It's as you can see in that image, there are 3 panels that are illuminated, and what you see there is a kind of a piano roll. Well, it is a piano roll that's been unfolded. And this work really looks at, I guess, different ways of extracting aesthetic pleasures from a piano roll, which is essentially a device for reproducing music on a piano. But we were rather curious about how it is an aesthetic object in of itself. And I also bring an interest myself in sound archives and how sound is held as an archive, both as a recording, but also as these kind of transcriptions and transductions into other materials. And so this particular work basically came because I found out that there was the Film and Sound Archive was giving away 80 a bunch of piano rolls for people who could make a good argument for using them. And so we were able to get some of these rolls and go through and pick the ones we really liked. And basically, look, I go into a lot of detail in the article, but it's looking at the work visually, how it takes on other aesthetic, it becomes expressive in other ways, as a kind of an undulating topography. If you look it up closely, you actually see these undulations of lines, and they look very much like a landscape, which you can actually see outside the window next to where this work's installed at Tarawara in just outside of Melbourne. Yeah, so you can see there. So there are these kind of correspondences that are kind of interesting, and it looks at, I guess, it looks at that sort of ambiguity where in effect, we're looking at a data, a very early form of kind of zeros and ones in a way. But we kind of jolted into this other expressive realm. And so I go into some detail in the article about what that's referencing. And I guess touching on the fact that pianos are these sort of colonial sort of objects that were sort of taken out. We saw that picture just briefly before of a camel strapped up with a player piano on it. And so yes, I talk about that a bit as well. Anyway, that's probably enough for the time being from me.
Thanks very much, David, and certainly speaks to the kind of synesthesia that we're experiencing in terms of relationship between the visual and sound. Certainly. Sonia, are you with us?
Hi, Kevin, and hi, everybody. And I'm speaking not far away from David because we work together, and we're both on the lands of the Wurundjeri and Woiwurrung people, and we pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. So this project, thank you very much for the invitation to speak on it, Gary. It's an older project, and it's sometimes really nice to go back with, you know, and this project was made in 2009, so it's returning to a project that comes from a time when David and I were very much interested in the human voice. And you can see the project's made for a gallery. So David and I are artists who, while we are very interested in the world and the materials of the world, the works are largely speculative and very much research driven. And our projects change. So this was the most metallic of all our projects. At the time, we were really interested in the effects of architecture on the human voice, the architecture of the gallery, and other really resonant spaces like caves and cathedrals, which don't really seem to connect. But what they all do is they have effects on the human voice. So in a cave, you might hear an echo where the sense of the human voice, the original sense of the human voice, becomes damaged in some way. The original sense becomes nonsense. In this, well, I should maybe touch on the cathedral. The cathedral is one of the touchstones where the voice of the spiritual leader, the priest, in the case of the cathedral, is amplified, and there are kind of spooky effects. And there's the way that the effect of the architecture on the voice can actually enhance the status of the person delivering that vocalization. So for this piece, we were very interested in transmitting the voices through the metal. And what happens via a series of transducers, and the vocalizations take on metallic effects. So here there are a series of metallic objects that we created. And as you walk around the space of the gallery, you feel like there's something let loose in the gallery. And David and I like to think of that as a kind of a trickster that's acting on the objects. Things suddenly come to life, and the metal objects visibly vibrate from time to time. So that's probably all to say. And yeah, it's been great. Before I go, I'm going to say I'm going to be playing this and with this, and chosen because they're both metal objects.
Okay, heavy metal, very heavy
metal. Yes.
Thanks so much, Sonia. And Diane, would you be able to join us again and briefly mention the jeepney?
Yeah, sure.
Another Filipino
Yeah, sure.
icon.
Before I go to that, this is a very brief article anyway. I was just like wowing every time somebody presented a project. You know, it's not a lot that I get opportunity to listen to all these wonderful projects. Also, writing about listening, we don't have a lot of opportunity. So thank you so much, Gary and Kevin, for inviting me here. I call this Jeepney Through the Years or Through the Ears. It's a listening article. No, I didn't want to say so much. I just wanted to present to you a recording of how it sounded like. So a jeepney, of course, as some of you might know, is a public utility vehicle that is a product of the, it's a remnant of the American colonial period that has been converted into this beautiful piece of art. It is very famous because of its kitschy design. It's considered one of our folk art. But I wanted to focus more on how you experience the jeepney sensorially, primarily by hearing, by listening while you are riding it. So so the recording is more or less focused on that. I know that the project or the magazine is about sounds of making. This project, the listening article that I did is actually a sound of unmaking, because I thought it's important to record the sound of the jeepney because of the, what's the English word? Because of the phase out. It's being phased out by the government. They just stopped now because we had a big protest earlier in the month, but it will happen soon. So as like what David said, no, we actually believe also that sound is a form of archiving. And this article is going to be part of a memory that will be made, or that has to be gathered before the jeepney is well, totally gone. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Diane, and everybody can listen to this in the article. Now we go to Gamelan. Neil, are you with us?
Yes.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Well, hi everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. This article sort of came out of the blue quite quickly. It refers to really a lifetime of work that I've been fascinated with Indonesian gamelan, Balinese and Javanese. And but I came to gamelan through an interest in sound art and music, and then started building my own instruments, and discovered this really wonderful social response that people had to being able to play a set of percussion instruments where we use the gamelan form to create society. So gamelan is like a model of society, and all the different roles of the gongs and the timekeeping parts of the music and the melodic elaborations, they're all like sets of social relationships. And so that was the company that I worked with, called Gong House, way back in the late 80s, early 90s. There's not much gamelan in that, but in fact, that was the entrance for our theatre production, and the gamelan was sitting on the stretcher. So going to working in building gamelan and doing performances and festivals, we soon were asked to run workshops with the instruments, and we started a long tradition of residencies and music interventions, in social interventions, and we worked a lot with Indigenous people in Victoria, and through that work met a Filipino company. So Philippines is a thing tonight, and called Kaliwat from Davao in Mindanao, and they also work with First Nations people, and they were interested in how we use the gamelan in relation to First Nations truth-telling, building community, creating ritual. A non-Western art form. It resonated well with many of the social practices of the First Nations people we were working with. So they asked us to come and collaborate with them in the Philippines, and this tells the story of the just a short explanation of some of the terrible troubles, like the conflict that is involved in trying to support First Nations people back in the 90s in Mindanao, and how music and dance was integral to maintaining their culture and therefore their land rights. So it was intensely political. Dancing was an intensely political act, and we were there trying to continue the cultural form, to encourage those sorts of cultural preservation and development through new materials, through making new instruments. The rainforest had been chopped down. People didn't think they could make drums without snake skins. So there were all sorts of amazing things that we don't realize can inhibit and destroy culture. So then another part of the story is then how gamelan, as most of you would know, is a strange tuning to Western ears. And in my work, I was always dealing with the problem of tuning, and I found various compromises, and all of them have problems. It's a very problematic space because, for 15 years I worked in psychology and neuroscience trying to understand the auditory perception of why this is such a problematic thing. And it's all about neuroplasticity, the time it takes to understand the sounds of a culture, and how we become, how our enculturation becomes embodied in the way we hear, and that either allows us, affords us understanding of our own cultural forms, but can prevent us from understanding other cultural forms until we give ourselves the time to become immersed in them. So right now I'm making gamelan from aluminium and modern materials, but I'm gone back to using Balinese tuning because the people who understand gamelan prefer Balinese tuning, because that's how they hear the music. And the task then is to bring that to the West. The problem is then how to enculturate and embody that tuning and timbres and understanding of sound into a Western culture, so that Western culture can appreciate, can benefit from the incredible pro-social opportunities that the gamelan in all its forms could provide for our societies.
Yes.
Sorry,
thanks so much, Neil. It's a big project, and certainly the evolution of the gamelan as you have assisted is quite remarkable. And taking a step back, we have a second story of the gamelan from MB Tan Aaron. Are you with us, MB?
Yes, hi. Yeah, so that's so interesting what Neil was saying, because I feel like that was something I was super interested in, how I grew up in the West. I'm Indonesian, but although I've been to Indonesia many times as a child, I think what Neil was saying, how, yeah, being so immersed in one culture and then maybe it inhibiting your understanding of another culture and the sounds, that was something I kind of wanted to touch on in my piece. And so I also wrote about the gamelan. I wanted to understand it more on a deeper level and also talk to a practitioner and a musician. And so I talked to Pariman Jonogoro, who is a pretty well-known musician in Java. And he's maybe from more of a younger generation. And so he was able to develop his own styles and also do all these workshops across Indonesia, teaching gamelan with also like his local group. And so, yeah, it was really interesting speaking with him, because although I feel like I come from more of an experience-based aspect, where I've listened to gamelan, I've seen the performances, but I didn't understand kind of maybe like the practice behind it and the values behind gamelan as well. And yeah, gamelan isn't just about sound and creating like a piece. It's very communal. There's a very strong like learning aspect to it. And I think that's what Pariman Jonagoro really, that's what his passion was, from my understanding when I was talking to him. I think he is so experienced that he really wanted to share that knowledge onto teaching kids, doing a lot of workshops in institutions as well, and really like building a strong strong community around playing the gamelan. And the gamelan is a very complex kind of sound. Like it can be played up to 30 instruments, and there can be up to like 15 players. But although it's so difficult, you can still like learn so much from it, because it's really about communication between the players and the dialogue between players. So I really enjoyed learning about that. And getting more into depth into an Indonesian tradition that is still evolving. It was really fun writing this piece and learning more about it.
Yeah, thanks so much, MB, and particularly for focusing on the social aspect of sound as evidence in that particular practice, which also comes out in Victor Gama's 2-person harp, and obviously Gary's earlier article on lamellophone. So, terima kasih, thank you. And now we go to Craig. Are you still with us, Craig?
Yes, of course, yes.
Great.
It's great to hear everyone's presentation. So my work originally probably could be considered a branch from the hobo Harry Parch, who developed his own instruments. And one of the things that impressed me about Parch's instruments is they seem to belong to this country that you couldn't really place, and this kind of also kind of matched his aspect of being homeless. So in my early on, I was a runaway for a year, so that I kind of share this experience of homelessness with Parch. But so when I started to make my own instruments, I noticed that that they too they didn't seem to fit, in different Western instruments. But I ended up modifying, getting involved in different tunings. I ended up modifying a lot of traditional Western instruments just because it saved on material, and there was a lot of things like making instruments out of wood is rather problematic because so much hardwoods are endangered. So you have to be very careful. So it was almost better to take pre-existing instruments. And so in this article, I actually covered, which is actually the second ensemble that I built of instruments, which the original instruments involved like a 31 tones per octave and 22 tones per octave, and tuned to high harmonics so that you could hear more distinctions that you don't hear in Western music, for instance, and involve the corporeality of producing music. And I think that would be another aspect. What else? There's so many. Pretty much, I kind of think of my work as a condensation of many different things that have come together from many different directions. Like there's probably like I originally from Los Angeles, where I worked as a scenic artist in film. So a lot of my work was like a theatrical work based on, so I was making silent films and would do live soundtracks to them. And then I got interested in working with shadow puppets as another way of incorporating music in part of it, along with the visual elements and of theater and elements and times. And I guess, yeah. So I guess one of the aspects of me designing instruments is to not so much create separate instruments, but was to actually create an orchestra. Like a group of like a commune of instruments that work together. It kind of, so it's like you have like different aspects of they're like a community of sound, all in their own, of which interlocks with each other. And some instruments, fill in places where other instruments don't make sound, and using the combination of metal and wood and reeds, I think is not too much strings, because they take too long to tune, especially if you use a lot of them. So I guess that's it. I guess. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Craig. I think it's a nice balance between the traditional and the speculative in the issue, that both grounds the work, but also opens up possibilities, certainly in your work. Thank you so much. And while we're still on the xylophone, and Delia, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great.
You hear me?
Welcome.
Yes.
Where are you?
Yes. Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, and I'm now in Belgium. Thank you so much for inviting me to write this article and to attend this launch. Has been so interesting to hear all the stories and about sound making. Learned a lot. Yeah, I'm right now in my office. So time to time, maybe my colleague will show up, but just don't mind him. And so it's a project about the xylophone of the Asante people. This instrument is called mansa. It's a research actually about resounding the instruments, and just a bit connecting to what Craig has been talking about, making instrument. I don't make instrument, but I'm designing an electronic replica setup to resound this instrument. Well, but the project is going to happen for 3 years. So for this article, I actually propose something else. Is to talk about how we can resound it, and also to collaborate with people, the locals, the diaspora, and maybe international musicians, to try to find new meanings for this instrument. This is part of a museum collection, and people over there in Congo actually don't know much about it. So the instrument has been declining, it's a rarity and forgotten. And so rather than just restituting the instrument, like the object, I hope to resound this instrument. I hope that we know about the sound. And so the last week we have been recording the instrument sounds. Well, because the article was written like about 2 months ago, so that part was not mentioned yet. I don't show a photo of it yet, but if you're interested, you might find it on internet later. And so we're recording the instrument one by one, tone by tone, and so hopefully we can start a database. There are altogether 159 xylophones, so it will take us some time. And so these sounds will be used in this replica installation. And so hopefully I can bring this instrument to more people, and then we can create more sound of it, and we gradually can give a new meaning to the instrument. I think that's all about it.
Well, thank you so much, Delia. And there's obviously a resonance there with the gamelan and the way it's evolving in a couple of the stories, and it's very curious to see it in Africa as well. So thank you so much. Finally,
thank you.
We'll come back to you, Gary, with the Osaka World Expo 1970.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. I was really amazed to see these instruments in Osaka, and you can read the sort of story of them. Some people here might be familiar with the Bachet brothers, and French brothers, one an engineer, the other trained as an artist, and they decided to create a whole new way of making instruments and sound. And they were invited to create these instruments for the Osaka World Expo in 1970. The instruments were kind of put away after the expo, and then they were discovered only relatively recently. But I was sort of interested in one idea that Ryuichi Sakamoto, who, as we know, passed this year, at the beginning of his life in music, as a teenager, he went to the 1970 Osaka Expo and saw these instruments, and they were a terrific sort of inspiration for him. And then right at the end of his life, in the last year of his life, he spent some time with these reconstituted Bache instruments, making some recordings that sort of fed into his last releases. So I sort of love that the circularity of that story, of the sort of lifelong inspiration from these very sort of strange and beautiful and interesting instruments. I'll let people sort of read the rest of the story there, but if you don't know the Bache story, it's a terrifically interesting one.
Well, thanks very much, Gary. And it seems like there's been a lot of memory involved in this issue as well, in terms of thinking about sounds of the past that still have a relevance today. And now we come to the chorus of objects. But I wonder, Craig, given the fact that we're faced with this Zoom challenge, we could all learn now how it is that we can actually enable our objects to speak. So can you remind us again how we do this?
So up in the left-hand corner, there should be a green button, and I think it should say original sound for musicians. And I think you have to click it so that it says on. Otherwise, it'll mute anything that isn't speech.
I'm not getting that button. I'm on a Mac. Does that make a difference?
Is there a little green dot?
If you go into the audio settings.
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, audio settings, right.
And you'll find under audio profile, original sound for musicians. Actually, mine's got echo cancellation. That might be it, which I turn off.
Are you talking about the system audio settings or the Zoom?
Kevin, leave echo cancellation on.
Leave echo cancellation on?
Yes.
Yeah,
keep it selected.
All right. Can you hear this?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So
sorry,
are
Kevin.
you all set up?
Can you also? Oh, there we go. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Hi.
Okay. Objects, it's your turn to speak. Beautiful. Well said. Couldn't agree more. Now this is a slight change in pace, but because Saiful was stuck in traffic in Dakar, he was unable to join us at the beginning, but I invite him to say something about dear Jocelyn Damager, to whom this particular issue is dedicated. And Gary mentioned the South Project earlier, and Jocelyn spoke at the inaugural conference of the South Project, and she charmed everyone by breaking into song, a beautiful Hindi song that really captured the moment. So Saiful, thank you for making it. And what do you think represents the spirit of Jocelyn Damager?
Thank you very much, Kevin, for this opportunity, and apologies again for the delay in joining this group. I'll just begin by saying that it was a wonderful session. Before I begin with Jocelyn's memories, two things came to mind when I was hearing this wonderful session that you have actually brought together of sound. One that came to my mind was that in Bangladesh, there is a flute which is made from the leaf of a tree. And it can be any leaf, any tree. It all depends that they pluck the leaf off the tree and play the sound of it. It's quite unique because there is no instrument. The instruments are hanging on the trees. There are very few people who do that, but there's a wonderful video in which one of the latest songs begins with the artist who plays that leaf, because the whole two leaves compress and then the sound comes out, and it's quite piercing actually. So that just came randomly to my mind. The second thing that did come to my mind with this session on sound, if I may say so, was that because I deal slightly more with weaving, with the sound of weaving. I once recorded it in a good muslin, for example, the kind of cloth that I research, sari, the shuttle moves about 140,000 times in order to complete that sari. And all that you hear is the whoosh of the shuttle as it moves, and the two foot pedals, and the breathing of the weavers. I call it the voice of the loom. I had once recorded it. So it's these peripheral or direct sounds which actually make up our universe of crafts. So thank you for that. I just wanted to mention it. I shall come on to Jasleen Dhamija now, and I must say that I perhaps met her when she was probably above the peak of her presence. It was in 2015, and she was probably about somewhere in 80, 82 by that time. She had slowed down considerably, and she was almost more of a wealth of knowledge, of observations, of suggestions, rather than directly creating crafts. As a matter of fact, I think she wrote something like 17 books, and 2 of them were in cookery. One of them, I think the last one, which is the exotic and the erotic in cooking of Indian food, was the last one that she wrote, which was the last one that I saw, actually physically saw, when she handed it over to me. My involvement with crafts has been specifically with the weaving of it, especially the fine cotton weaving, which is what I call it muslin, which has fundamentally the roots of it being in East Bengal, where I'm from, where I'm sitting at the moment, though it did spread across through communities in West Bengal. And therefore, West Bengal being part of India, Jasleen was one of the go-to people in order to know more about the craft. This particular craft has not been recorded very well by us. By that, I mean the Bengalis, or by even the Indian researchers. There has been a recording of it by the English colonial observers when they came over here, and later on by the VNA itself. So therefore, one had to go either right down to the weavers in order to know more about it, or one had to deal with people who had spent their lifetime in going to the weavers. And one of those people was Jasleen. Jasleen was a towering figure in more ways than one. I mean, when I first came upon her, it was to know more about weaving and more about muslin. And she was quoting in paraphrases. She was saying things either in English or in Urdu. She was born in Pakistan, in Abbottabad. So it would be in Urdu, which I understood very well, or in Hindi, but sometimes in Farsi, which is Iran, where she had actually lived for about 4 years, where she was a researcher, where she had started the non-rural earning program, and she had written a book about, and of which she had many artifacts. But she would quote that also. And she was often, as Kevin mentioned, a person of music, but a person of poetry. And I think more importantly than music and poetry, was a person of passion. So she would be very disappointed if your approach to her was in the style of a Q&A, or if your approach to her was that of a tick box style. To her, as she put it, the weaving is spun from our breaths and woven in our hearts, and she lived that kind of phraseology. Our family, as I learned later, her father was a rich businessman, but had his ups and downs. Therefore, the 4 daughters, of which Justine was one, moved around. And I understand from others that they were quite stunning in their own ways, not only in how they looked, but also in the practice of the arts. So Justine was more into visual arts, painting and so on, whereas one of the sisters was known as the Nightingale of Quetta because of her unique voice. Now, some of it rubbed off on Justine, but one can only imagine that if you were thunderstruck at her voice, what her sisters might have been like. I never heard it, but that was the kind of credit that she had. And the other 2 went into more into slightly the writing and into the reading and so on like that. So when they left Pakistan during the partition that happened in 1947 and resettled in Delhi, Justine was kind of wrenched from one part of the subcontinent to another part and almost forced to live in Delhi, because Delhi can be quite chaotic, can be quite commercial, can be quite bureaucratic. Certainly not the center of crafts, even though it was the center of the Mughal, the Mughal dynasty. So Justine did describe once to me that it's somebody that you'd rather forget, a lover that I'd like to jilt, as she put it, in her way, but a lover that I have to tolerate. And Justine had a share of tolerance and love. So in many ways, she would say to me that you have to get very close, you have to wear your craft, to the point of one day, even, I'm wearing a Punjabi over here. This is just one of Bangladesh's creation. She would comment on what I would wear and say that, oh, but you're dealing in muslin. Surely you can wear something finer and better. And then let's begin. Her appetite for knowledge until the late 80s, she died at the age of 90, old by some standards, young by many. And till the last, when I showed her one of my finest pieces, she was commenting about the weave, about the warp, about the weft, about what we call the density or the tan, as we say, of the craft, and would be extremely hospitable, making sure that the drinks were there, making sure that the food was there, making sure that the books had been laid out, and asking details about whatever I had written or whatever that I wanted to know about. Even I had branched off into making films, and her son, involved in filmmaking, she introduced me with him, and encouraged the 2 of us to get together. I think my impression of Justine that will sort of live with me is how, if she sensed that passion in you, how she would reach for that mobile of hers. She had 2 of them, reach for them and just ring up the director of the Delhi Museum or the curator of the Madras one and just say, I've got Saiful Islam over here, he's a genius. She would compliment me to the point where I would not recognize myself, quite honestly, but she did it to everybody else. And then she would say that you must meet him, as if it was for the director to meet me, whereas it was very much the other way around. So that was how helpful she could be. She could be critical, but she could be enormously generous. And at the same time, though she was, obviously laboring under issues of health, she would make sure that all the work would go on, asking me for inputs into small details, whether the catalog print, whether this was right. And at the end of the day, still reminding me that there was time for one last whiskey before I left. So all in all, obviously we speak about such people as being pioneers, as being unique. It's conventional to do so. But I think in many ways, Justine lived up to that billing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such a beautiful tribute, Saiful. It really captures the distinct character of her, and even though she was perhaps overshadowed by her sister in music, it certainly was a sensibility in her work. So thank you so much. And thanks everyone. That's a wrap for this launch. We've got another couple of months to enjoy the different articles and to absorb them and to listen to them. So thank you so much.